Happy Friday. About 200 miles southwest of Denver, Colorado, there is a tiny little town called Paonia, Colorado. It is a picturesque little town of less than 2,000 people that sits right on the banks of the Gunnison River. Every single year on July 4th, the residents of Paonia hold a parade through their little downtown. This year's parade, earlier this week, featured this float from a group called Citizens for a Healthy Community. There was also this special ride for Paonia's Citizen of the Year. Nice car. Congratulations, ma'am. And then there was this. A column of imposing green tanks rolling through the center of town, one of which was equipped with two mounted 40-millimeter anti-aircraft guns. These tanks, it turns out, A, were not props, and B, were the parade contribution from the local zillionaire, a fellow named Bill Koch. You've heard of the Koch brothers? This is the other Koch brother. Bill Koch decided that he wanted to roll these military tanks through downtown Paonia as his contribution to the parade this year. It's a free country. What are you going to do, right? Well, what one local Paonia resident, who was, I guess, not fond of this decision, what he decided to do was this. He staged his own personal Tiananmen Comes to Paonia protest. He walked into the middle of the road, parked himself right in front of the approaching column of Koch brothers tanks, and he refused to move. The guy with the sign is a local resident named Sid Lewis. He is a hairdresser. He is a former town councilman. His sign said on one side, buying the planet or just taking it. And it said on the other, democracy bought and sold. Eventually, Mr. Lewis was physically escorted out of the way of the tanks by one of the men who was riding on top of the Koch tank, but not before he made his point. And not before the Denver Post caught wind of the whole thing and christened the local hairdresser Tiananmen Sid for his free speech act of defiance. Now, the whole democracy being bought and sold idea there may be a reference to Bill Koch, specifically in his own outsized local influence as the guy putting the column of tanks in the local parade, as the owner of multiple energy companies and the owner of huge swaths of not just Paonia, but two neighboring counties in Colorado as well. It may also have been a reference to what Bill Koch's brothers are doing in national politics right now. In total, Charles and David Koch have reportedly said they will spend $400 million trying to defeat President Obama and congressional Democrats this year. $400 million. Two guys. That's more than the entire John McCain campaign spent in 2008. And it's not just them. In addition to them, Karl Rove has already announced that his groups, which appear to be mostly funded by very rich conservative individuals, they plan to raise and spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million in this year's elections. This doesn't count the Romney campaign itself or the Republican Party. And that's all on top of the Koch brothers' money. How are the Democrats attempting to match that kind of firepower? To understand that, it may be helpful to keep in mind this image of the hairdresser in sandals up against the column of tanks with the guns. This weekend's New York Times Magazine has a long profile on what might be the Democratic Party's best hope for competing with this juggernaut of right-wing money that's all aimed at defeating President Obama. It's the Democrats' own super PAC, run by President Obama's former deputy press secretary, Bill Burton. But look at how they are getting outgunned thus far. This pro-Obama super PAC, anecdote is told in the New York Times this weekend, was super excited earlier this year. They worked their tails off. They put together a whole bunch of donations from left-leaning donors. They put it together piece by piece, and they cobbled together $10 million in total for a multi-state ad buy. It was a huge investment for them, a landmark investment for them. And then 3 days after they did that, they got word that one guy alone on the other side, Republican Sheldon Adelson, was personally contributing that much, $10 million, that day to the Mitt Romney super PAC. Oh, and he was donating another $10 million that day to Karl Rove's super PAC at the same time. Oh, and by the way, he was now saying that maybe he'll contribute 10 times that much, $100 million, when push comes to shove. Now, this is an optimistic profile of the Democratic side in the New York Times Magazine this weekend. But what it says is that the only Democratic plan for trying to compete in terms of ad spending in this election is to wage asymmetric warfare. From the Times this weekend, having conceded the arms race before it even began, the Democratic super PAC team recognized that its only hope lay in asymmetrical warfare. Ruthless, relentless storytelling that could be done on the cheap. You would never know that this is the party in power, right? They're talking about themselves having to use guerrilla tactics in order to compete with overwhelming force on the other side that they can never hope to match. A week ago tonight, from Air Force One, President Obama reportedly convened a conference call with many of his top campaign donors. And in that call, he reportedly sounded the alarm. According to reporting by Lloyd Grove at the Daily Beast, who says he heard a recording from that call, the president told his donors, quote, "We are going to see more money spent on negative ads through these super PACs and anonymous outside groups than ever before. And if things continue as they have so far, I will be the first sitting president in modern history to be outspent in his re-election campaign." The president appears to be right in that assessment, at least so far. In May, President Obama was outraised by the Romney campaign by a lot. Mitt Romney managed to outraise Mr. Obama that month by nearly $17 million. For this past month, for June, the Romney campaign has just happily announced that they've improved on their big number from May. They raised more than $100 million. And again, this is in addition to all the outside money. We still don't know what it's going to be in terms of the number for President Obama in June, but his campaign is already telegraphing that it is not nearly as much as what the Romney campaign raised. So that's where things stand right now, both for the campaign and these outside groups, in terms of head-to-head Obama versus Romney fundraising. But the overall picture speaks worse than that in terms of Democratic donors. The Boston Globe reporting this week that overall, the super PACs supporting Republicans overall in the country have thus far, for this election cycle, raised more than 3 times as much as the super PACs supporting the Democrats. I mean, this isn't just for the presidency. This is for everything. Look at that. Republicans have $3 for every $1 that Democrats have. Whether or not President Obama is able to beat Mitt Romney as, what do we call him now, an underdog incumbent, an outspent underdog incumbent, whether or not President Obama is able to overcome that great disparity, a disparity benefiting the Republicans is also going to have implications down the ticket in the congressional races. Who controls Congress? The money makes a really big difference. In 2010, whatever else was going on in the country, when the Republicans took back control of the House of Representatives in 2010, it is not incidental to note that the Republicans also outspent the Democrats that year by a 2-to-1 margin. It matters. If Republicans can repeat that feat this year, then the sky's the limit for them in terms of Congress. They likely win control of Congress, I would venture a guess, regardless of what happens in the presidential race. This was not always an inherently partisan structural problem. I mean, in some ways now it is, right? If you think about specifically what Citizens United did, that cleared the way for corporate unlimited donations. So that does tilt the playing field in favor of corporate interests and therefore in favor of Republican interests. But in terms of just individual rich people in America making a difference in politics, that does not necessarily have to lean inherently right. In 2004, as a matter of fact, it leaned left. The great conservative boogeyman, right, George Soros, liberal zillionaire, he gave more than $23 million to Democratic groups in 2004. Peter Lewis from Progressive Insurance, he gave just about the same amount, a little bit less. Film producer, businessman Stephen Bing gave nearly $14 million to Democratic-leaning groups in that same year, 2004. The Democrats, in terms of rich Democratic donors in 2004, way outpaced the Republicans. But this time around, for whatever reason, those wealthy Democratic donors are sitting on the sidelines. George Soros has given about $2 million so far, compared with $24 million before. Peter Lewis, $200,000 this time around, compared with $23 million before. Steve Bing, $425,000, compared with $14 million before. So why aren't big-dollar Democratic campaign donors, the people who can really make a difference in terms of their personal decisions of what to do on campaign spending as individuals, or campaign-related spending as individuals, why are they sitting on their hands on the Democratic side so far? Are they waiting for something and they're all going to get in later? Do they want some kind of attention they're not getting from the president? Do they think that it's hopeless because, yeah, maybe they're rich guys, but they're not the Koch brothers and they never will be and they'll be outspent no matter what they do? Is the post-Citizens United political zillionaire Thunderdome that's been created by the Supreme Court now so inherently distasteful to people who have democratic politics that they just don't want to play in that dirty game anymore? For those of us who are watching this from the outside, reporting on it, observing on it, thinking about what it means for our country, the likely outcome of the election, it seems like an important question, an important part of the process. But for the people who are inside making these decisions, how do they view their role in it? And what do they think of this really big, really obvious disparity this year between the two sides that just keeps getting worse and worse no matter how much the Democrats and the president himself sound the alarm about it? Joining us now is one of the country's major fundraisers for President Obama. He is a bundler of donations to the president, which we know because President Obama's campaign discloses that, even though Mr. Romney's campaign does not. You know him better as the co-founder of Miramax Films, the co-chairman of the Weinstein Company, one of America's best-known and most accomplished film producers, Harvey Weinstein. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Rachel. Nice to be here.
It's nice to be here, too. We had drama with a microphone and a person falling down at the top of the segment. You handled it perfectly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Reminded me of one of my movies, one of my thrillers.
If it ends up in a thriller, I want a credit. Why have you been a fundraiser, a bundler for President Obama, and what's your reaction to that sort of disparity I was talking about between the two sides there?
You know, it's when you talk about spending money, I'll give you an example of two movies that I distributed. I spent the exact same amount on both movies. One movie was called The King's Speech. It grossed $140 million, won a few Oscars, including Best Picture, and did sensational based on its budget. The other picture was called Our Idiot Brother. And we spent the same exact money, and the movie grossed $25 million. Not bad for what we paid for it, but not very, okay, good, a little bit of profit. To me, Romney is Our Idiot Brother, and Obama is The King's Speech. You can spend all the money in the world. If you've got a bad product, it doesn't matter. Ask anybody on Madison Avenue. Don't ask the Wall Street guys. Bring the advertising guys on. If I have a defective product, I can spend $5 billion. I'm not going to sell anything. The Edsels, they spend more money at Ford on the Edsel than any modern car in history. And it was the bomb of a lifetime. We can go through product after product. But let's make it even more fun. I'm happy if the Koch brothers would come on your show and I could get, Jeffrey Katzenberg and some of the other guys, and we can just talk about their politics.
Why do you think that we're seeing this change over time from people who have Democratic politics, who do support this president, having been willing to give a lot of money on the Democratic side in the past, just giving less?
I think people are confident on the Democratic side. I think you see, Romney, and you hear even conservatives, Rupert Murdoch, criticizing, Mitt Romney. There's so much dissension, and Mike Lupica wrote a column in the Daily News calling him a mute Romney. He doesn't say anything. Maybe that's why these guys have to raise all that money and have advertising. We have a president who speaks and speaks to the issues. They have a candidate who says nothing. They also have a campaign strategy, which is say nothing. At a certain point, the American public will get tired of it. If the Democrats need money, people will raise more. Right now, I think everybody's sitting